Chip and vampires? Great combination. Hi everyone and welcome to another Ranger Rant. Of course everyone knows I'm Archer9234. Today I'll be discussing the Power Rangers Mystic 4 episodes titled Strangers Within. Now this episode is based off episodes 11 and 12 of Maji Ranger. For the most part, the main plot elements for Necrolai, Chip, and Vita are basically copying the Maji Ranger episodes. Only very few things are different from the Maji Ranger episodes. Other than that, it's pretty much following the same story. So the episode starts off with Nick, Xander, and Vita inside the Rock Emporium. Madison and Chip had gone ahead to Root Core, and we find out that Lily wanted to bring Nick to a rock concert. It was some brand new concert that she was trying to, forcibly get Nick to go, even though the store was closed. Unfortunately, the Rangers actually had to do some training, which is good to see, and the PR actually doing training. And unfortunately, they couldn't go. But every time Lily tried to get Nick to go, he refused. So she kept going after Xander, and then Vita all of a sudden just says, "Oh, I'll go." But since they had to do some training at Root Core, and they simply can't say that in front of Lily, they had to make sure they didn't go, and then Nick threw her out of the store. Unfortunately, Vita being herself, she did go along and just gave an excuse while the other two guys go to Root Core. Now, this is pretty unique for PR. Usually we don't get to see any kind of music, rock concert stuff inside PR. Normally we don't do it. Although it was kind of a cheesy set though, because there was not that many people in there. Well, the DJ music and stuff was fine. It was just, there was not a lot, it didn't feel like a rock concert like atmosphere. Well, Vita and Lily are inside the rock concert and they're listening to the DJ's music. Unfortunately, Lily's mother calls and tells her, like, you have to get home. Obviously, she knows she's lying. She's not supposed to be there. It's a school day, so she forcibly makes Lily go home. Well, Vita kind of feels bad and like, oh, I should leave too. But then Lily was like, no, stay. And so Vita stays. Unfortunately, this music is a hypnotic spell. Everyone in the room gets all in a trance, including Vita, which she does have those really interesting eyes to look like she's really like under a spell. While the DJ turns into the monster, and we assume that something happens to Vita. We finally return to Root Core. We see the Rangers, training their new normal stuff, looking through books and trying to look through everything and see how they can get better spells and stuff. And Nick echoes Danny and Max's famous lines, "Never give up," which was a little weird moment. It's like, oh great, here we go again with the never give up stuff. And then all of a sudden Vita walks in. Now, at this point in time, the audience doesn't know that Vita has been gone for a very long time. Basically, Vita comes in, she apologizes that she was missing for the night. She's like, I won't do it again. Unfortunately, everyone else says, you were missing for the entire day and the night from before, which is kind of confusing, though. She's missing for basically an entire day. No one assumes to like, I should call her. Maybe something's wrong. I mean, at most, Toby should have been complaining. Well, where is she? Did she miss work? Something. But no one seemed to simply ask where she went. So while this is going on in Root Core, while everyone's getting confused of what happened, they get an emergency call that Koragg and some Hinyaks are inside the forest, and they simply go outside to fight them. I want to point out, though, this is night for day shooting. Basically, what they do is instead of spending, money to film really at night and having lights and all this kind of extra stuff set up, they simply film in the daytime, lower the iris of the camera, and throw a filter on the lens, or in post-production where it's really daylight, but it's shot for night. That's the reason why the scene doesn't look that perfect. So when the Rangers finally arrive, where Koragg and the Hinyaks are all gathered up, they're going to simply go morph, but Vita instant says, well, why bother? Which is actually pretty right. I mean, they're just low-level minion Hinyaks. Who cares about them? In the beginning of the series, yeah, it makes sense for them to morph. But this is like several episodes later in the episode where I'm like, you don't need to fight at MS Morph. So Vita was doing kind of the right thing. The weird thing, though, is that she was kind of going crazy. Xander was saying that, oh, this extra sleeping kind of helped her because she was, took down 20, 30 Hinyaks without any problem. So after all the Hinyaks were defeated, Koragg simply butts into the fight and simply fights the Rangers. While Koragg goes big, the Rangers are transforming into the Mystic Titans, which is pretty cool in this episode because we usually don't get individual Zord fights that often. But it was nice to see that all the Rangers were fighting. So we're getting these cool moments where Nick and Madison and Chip are fighting Koragg while Xander is bringing up the rear because, again, he's the largest one, he's the slowest one, and plus they have to deal with some visual effects, so he's usually not showing that often. And, of course, Vita's using her ball move, and with the combination with Nick and fighting Koragg, and he knocks him away. So Koragg sees that they have improved in their fighting, although that's his usual excuse. It's like every episode they're improving, and you like, oh, okay, let's escalate the fight. So he transforms into his Centaurus wolf form. Just as this moment starts, the sun rises and Vita just completely goes crazy and passes out. The Rangers are totally confused. They don't know what's going on. Vita's forcibly demorphed and lands on the floor, passed out. The Rangers are like all totally defenseless, and Koragg goes, one of your team is down. You can totally leave yourself open. But at the last minute, Xander caught that and blocked the main attack right from the Rangers. And then Koragg simply storms off saying, you're too weak and blah, blah, blah. I understand Koragg and Wolzard in Magi Rangers are the honorable type villain. They won't take advantage of the situation. Even though they're evil, they won't kill a weakened opponent or a thing that's not fair. But after so many times he keeps doing this over and over again, it kind of keeps getting ridiculous. This was a perfect chance. There was no fault between Koragg and the Rangers. They simply let their guard down. He should have killed them. I don't even understand why the boss even allows this to continue. It's like the main bosses don't even care about honor. So why did they even bother allowing Koragg to act like this? So after the main fight, we finally go back to the Rock Emporium where everyone is worried about what's going on. And then Vita walks in where she has this bad pale complexion. She has sunglasses over her eyes in the day. She wears a hood. And then Chip out of nowhere is kind of getting this weird sense of like, what's going on with Vita? So a little bit is passing while the other Rangers are trying to figure out what's going on, and then we find out Chip has cartoon physics with him. He pulls out a book of vampires out of nowhere. The book is too big to fit inside a pocket or something. After Chip pulls out his book of vampires, Vita turns around and we finally get confirmed that she is a vampire by turning around, and we see her eyes glow and she has fangs. Although for some reason the fangs on Vita are not really fangs. You know, normally the canine teeth on people, on vampires, are really longer than the regular teeth, but for some reason Vita doesn't have those extra long teeth, so it just looks like they're just old crooked teeth on her rather than their vampire teeth. So we return to Rukor, and the other Rangers are sitting down at the table and trying to figure out like where's Udana, and we find out basically she's teaching Claire some invisibility stuff, so obviously she's not going to be in Rukor for a while because we know Claire's a little bit stupid when it comes to magic, so she's probably invisible at this point, and they're probably trying to figure out where she is. So since Chip thinks Vita is a vampire, he simply does the first test and fills up a glass of tomato juice. But since we are talking about vampires, she thinks it's blood. She gets all big eyes and grabs it. She drinks it, but then throws it up. And this is where we finally get revealed that Chip thinks Vita's a vampire. Everyone, of course, is laughing at her. Madison brings out her camera while this is going on, which is nice. We usually don't see her dealing with her videography and stuff and her cool little things that she likes to film and stuff. And then Chip is saying, you thought this was blood. This is where he's finally explaining to the team that she's a vampire. Although I found it really weird. It's perfectly fine to talk about blood and stuff with vampire talk and stuff, but it's not fine to show blood and see blood during injuries and fight scenes. I never understand this logic. So while the remaining Rangers leave with Rock Emporium, because everyone thinks this is ridiculous that Trip thinks Vita is a vampire, while Vita and Chip are simply packing up and getting ready. Vita simply announces to Chip, I am a vampire, and she was going to go suck his blood, but luckily enough he had his onion clover piece, and then Chip and Vita go to the outside of Rukor, and we finally get a little bit backstory to these characters. We find out basically that Vita has always protected Chip. They've been friends since they were young kids, all through high school, where we find out that Chip likes wearing stupid superhero costume, which is kind of ironic. And of course, Chip is trying to repay basically what Vita has done for him. So Vita and Chip finally arrive at the rock concert. He's seeing that everyone's getting hypnotized. Vita again is getting hypnotized. Everyone's getting confused. So that at the last minute, Chip looks at the DJ and we see that he transform into the monster. While Chip is under the spell of the monster, we find out that Necroli has been a part of this plan all along. Now I want to talk about her costume. Now back in the Broken Spell review, I basically was telling you that they had revamped her costume in order to remove her, more revealing costume that the Japanese people had designed. But in this episode, since these two parters featured so much of Necroli, and they had to rely on the Japanese footage as much, they actually switched her costume back to the Japanese footage. Well, since obviously this is Disney and they didn't want to show revealing skin, they simply had to awkwardly film Necroli even either in the dark, or the camera doesn't really stay in her midsection that often, so we usually don't see it as often. But it's there. When Necroli finally reveals herself to Chip, we find out that he has earplugs, which is great. He used his head. It seems like if it's a DJ, the spell must be coming from the music, which is great and all. The thing that bothered me the most is that he pulled out the earplugs during the DJ's music. I was kind of worried. It's like, isn't that stupid? You're fighting in the DJ's still going off. Wouldn't you become in a trance? It was just lucky enough that he wasn't paying attention, but it was still a risky move. Chip is trying to fight Necroli. Unfortunately, she's too strong for him, and he's trying his best, and he eventually has to be forced to morph in order to get out of there. He morphs, but unfortunately, again, she's still an outmatch for him. So they eventually have to retreat, and we have to figure out what to do next. So while at Root Core, the Rangers are trying to devise a plan, so they found out that the Fly Swatter monster is the one that has caused the spell. So if they defeat the monster, they break the spell on Vita. So they head out in order to find the monster. At this point in time, it's late at night, and the sun is slowly rising, so they don't have that much time. The Rangers morph, do their roll call, and they're fighting the monster. This is the first time we actually get to see in the Maji Ranger footage where Hoka actually transforms into a bee. In Maji Rangers, Hoka has the ability to transform into several different objects. They usually don't use this footage, but in this case, they had to kind of use it. So in order to get out of the monster's binds, she transformed into the bee, but they added these little extra effects over the video to disguise that it was a bee. I don't understand why they did it. I guess it was because it doesn't fit Vita's character, which is pretty unique because usually they don't bother personality problems between Japanese characters and the American actor characters. The thing that I don't like, though, is that we find out that the civilians are outside and near the battlefield, correct? However, at no point at all the civilians ever attack the Rangers. They're under a spell, they're vampires. Wouldn't Necroli or Fly Swatter send the civilians out to the Rangers? They would have been a perfect human shield, but they don't do that at all. They just stand there, growl, and do whatever they want. So after a little bit, the Rangers find Fly Trap. We finally get introduced to a unique 4 Magi Staff combo attack, and they defeat the monster. So while they're in their Megazord fight, the sun is slowly rising up, and we see that since the civilians are outside, the sun is starting to burn them. So the sunlight is slowing on, and they have to finish the fight really fast. Now, the thing that really bugged me is that Vita didn't flinch while the sun was rising. I know that everyone's going to say, well, Vita's inside the cockpit of the Megazord, but she is part of the Megazord itself. She forms the front part of the Megazord, so wouldn't the front part of the chest be exposed to the sun and her getting weakened? Right before they finish the monster with their final attack, we noticed that Nick missed his mark when everyone was getting ready to do their unison attack and then a slash move inside the chest cockpit. It was just funny because this happened also in Maji Rangers and in Mystic Force. I assume the actor missed his mark, but they just simply left it in. It was just kind of weird that they usually don't do that often. So after the monster's blown up and destroyed, everyone's like happy and like, oh, we broke the spell, hurrah, yay, Vita's back to normal. And Vita does look like she's back to normal. Her skin is returned to normal. She's perfectly happy, blah, blah, blah. We go back to the Rock Emporium. We find out that Lily and Vita are dancing and, being their goofy usual selves inside the Rock Emporium talking about. And we get this funny moment where we see Chip is trying to get Nick to join the vampire club that he is. We see this huge bag of junk and stuff for vampires, and then Chip brings up vampire chalk that looks like a sponge. It didn't even look like chalk. He was basically explaining what the chalk did. It's like basically if a person's a vampire and you're in this circle, and if they're still a vampire, they can't get out of the circle. Just as the last minute as Chip closes the circle, Vita hits the circle, and we see that this force field goes up, and it's showing basically Vita has not broken free of the spell, and she still is a vampire, freaking everyone out. So when part 2 begins, we find that Vita's has been moved to the Root Core. I would have liked to have seen how they moved Vita from the Rock Emporium to Root Core, trying to get past people. It's like, how did they get her out without Toby noticing? What happened along in that commercial break? So the Rangers are basically trying to figure out what to do. They have to basically they basically figured out that she's not connected to the fly trapper monster, but who gave her the original vampire bite. And then they had to put 2 and 2 together, and we found out Necroli is the vampire queen. She's the one who must have bitten her. Although it was never perfectly shown on camera, both in this and Maji Ranger, they really don't show like that, so we kind of got tricked off that. And the Rangers are trying to figure out, like, what could we do? Chip thinks that, well, if Koragg can contact Nick, why can't Nick contact Koragg? So at this point, they didn't think it failed. Nick doesn't get a response, but then all of a sudden, we hear Koragg's voice in Nick's head. And obviously, he's responded. It does work both ways. Nick tells everyone where to go. Unfortunately, Chip is pissed off. He's mad, so he goes out on himself, and the Rangers have to follow. So while everyone's going after Chip, the Rangers asked Claire to look after Vita. Now, the thing that bugged me the most, though, is that why did they go ask of Claire, of all people, to look after Vita? No matter what, a vampire can't leave this circle. So basically, why would you need someone to unguard her? So when the Rangers leave, we find that Vita is being summoned by Necroli, and she has to figure out a way to get out of there. So, of course, Vita pulls the old-fashioned, my stomach hurts, routine pain thing. So Claire gets worried, like, oh, it might be a real thing. And then we cut away from her and we don't know what's going to happen. Will she fall for the stupid trap, or will she not? So when we cut back to Koragg, we find out that Chip has arrived to Koragg first. He's confused, like, I was waiting for the red Mystic Ranger, but he got yellow. And we get into this fight. Of course, Koragg thinks lowly of him. He's like, oh, who cares about you? I only like the Red Ranger. So he's like, boringly fighting Chip. But then Chip does this, the lightning move, and then Koragg all of a sudden's like, oh, you've improved this time. And I was like, thinking in my head, he's done this move several times in past episodes now, but you think this move is automatically better, so you think he's worthy? Koragg's logic between honor and worthiness never makes sense. Even in Maji Ranger, it's so confusing. It's like 1 minute, like, oh, I don't care about you. You're weak and stupid. I don't need to fight you. But then all of a sudden they do one little thing that happens in a previous episode. Oh, now you're worthy, so I can fight you. It's just very confusing with this character. So eventually, all the Rangers finally arrive, and they're fighting Koragg. And then Koragg, after a while, gets bored of the Rangers because, oh, they're so weak, I don't care. But he does tell them, and even Nick gets confused, like, why are you telling us, how to, So Koragg is basically finally confirming that Necroli was the one who bit her and turned her into a vampire. So he's basically saying, if you defeat her, you'll be worthy enough to fight me, and he simply retreats. So the Rangers finally return to Root Court, and the Rangers see that Claire is inside the circle. And then everyone simply falls for that. Oh, great. Claire let her out of the circle. Vita has escaped and has retrapped her into the circle. All the Rangers think it's Claire, and then Xander scrapes off some of the thing, and then Claire simply runs off. And then finally, a few seconds later, that was a fake Claire. The real Claire was really outside, and then everyone feels like an idiot. Everyone assuming, oh, Claire's the one who's going to screw up, and then the Rangers screw up. Although this scene, it was perfectly great. It was a good way to get Vita out of the circle, but it just didn't make any sense. It's like, isn't Chip the one who knows vampires and everything and would have automatically known, well, why can't Claire get out of the circle? She's not a vampire. Wouldn't affect her at all. So it made no sense. And especially, how would Vita have been able to redraw the circle? Wouldn't touching the chalk burn her hand or something? I know I'm overthinking it, but they should have simply made Chip not be there at that moment, and it would have been a little bit more believable. So all the Rangers are all disappointed and disappointed and sad that they simply, let Vita escape. They don't know where she is. She's missing. Everyone's going crazy. So at the last minute, everyone's like, how do you defeat Necroli? So they simply think, well, the Xenotome knows everything. So they simply ask the Xenotome, how do we kill the Queen of the Vampires? And we see that we have this special crystal that has to be made. So while they're saying there's a lot of ingredients, and they're like, we don't have time to look for these ingredients, where do we go? Udana pops out of nowhere, and she's like, I'm the one who's been gathering the ingredients. And we finally get this emotional moment where Udana is basically saying, we don't have much time because Vita, the more she stays this way, she eventually is going to be permanently stuck as a vampire. Which I personally think this is the best moment in Mystic Force of Emotions, especially the actress who plays Madison. She actually gave off a tear, and I was like, oh, this is really good acting right here. So we find out that all the Rangers have to split up and look for Vita where she is, while Udana and Chip decide, I'm going to make the crystal. So while the other 3 Rangers are going around all night long trying to figure out where Vita is, Chip is becoming a sorcerer, mixing potions, doing all the cliche, magic stuff. While everyone's looking for Vita, we find out that she's in Necroli's lair. This is the first and only time we ever see Necroli's lair. And we see that she's obviously going to be staying there all night long. So unfortunately, the Rangers can't locate her at this point in time. So after the Rangers' failed attempt at finding Vita, they simply go back to their, their daily jobs. And then while the Rangers are all confused and just doing their jobs at the Rock Emporium, Vita pops in out of nowhere and like, I'm back, I'm fine, and everyone's all happy, and Madison's hugging her and stuff, and they go back to Root Court like to tell, Chip and Udana. Chip finally completes the special crystal. They finally get it out of the smoke, and it's ready to, to kill Necroli, where everyone pops in, and we see that Vita's perfectly normal. And then she's like, oh, I have gifts, and this, and that, and then everyone's like, yeah, and she's like, I defeated Necroli, and Udana, of course, says she doesn't buy it. And of course, Chip is doubting her, while the other Rangers are like, oh yeah, at first we doubted her, but I was like, oh yeah, it's okay. And then she doesn't respond somewhat to her normal self. She doesn't do her peace sign, which is really Hoka's thing. That's the reason why it doesn't really line up to Vita's character, and she doesn't do it again after this. It's really Hoka stuff. So at the last minute, Chip was like, don't eat the apple, knocks the apple onto the floor. Of course, Madison gets kind of mad. Everyone gets mad, but then all of a sudden the apple gets rotten and Vita simply escapes. So while Vita's escaping Root Core, she magically gets her cape. I never understood this. The other four Rangers, yeah, of course you're going to put your cape on while you go out to Root Core. Their normal thing is when they leave Root Core, they have their capes magically on. But it was weird. Like, Vita's under her spell. Why would she care about the cape? When Vita finally stops in this weird area of the city, we find out that Necroli is fully controlling her. She's fully evil and is going to use her powers on the Rangers. So unfortunately, everyone has to fight. So while the Rangers are trying to fight Vita, of course, since the Rangers don't want to harm her, they're not fighting at their best. There's their best way. Chip at the last minute is plugging in the crystal into his crossbow and is trying to fire at Necroli. She simply makes Vita a human shield. While this is going on and she's trying to fight Chip, at the last minute is trying to convince her to break out of the spell. Like, you're human, you're good, you're not supposed to, she's not supposed to be this way. She did snap out of her for this few seconds. At the last second, she broke back into the spell and then she went back evil. Then Chip regains his weapon and points it at Necroli. But unfortunately, Necroli has full control over Vita. She puts her directly in front of her body, while the other Rangers are saying basically, no, don't do it, but he has pretty much no other option. But at the last minute, Vita gives him a little sign, the peace sign again, signaling her that she is out of the spell and faking it at the same time. So Chip at the last minute takes his chance, fires the crystal at Necroli, Vita ducking and impacting Necroli directly on, and she blows up into pieces. The spell is officially broken. Vita is officially cured of the vampire spell and is no longer a vampire under her control. And then, of course, as usual, Koragg butts into the fight. Oh, you defeated Necroli, you're worthy, blah, blah, blah. And he goes right back to his Centaurus Wolf formation. The Rangers, of course, have to simply form the Titan Megazord. So obviously, since the Centaurus Wolf is much more stronger than the Mystic Titan at this point in time, Koragg simply easily outschools the Rangers. They don't know what to do. They're fighting effortlessly. But since the bond between Chip and Vita are so strong, they unlock a new spell code for the Megazord itself. Now, this new spell code is to simply operate the wings. Now, this really bugged me, and it had made absolutely no sense. Basically, this episode is saying that the wings that are on the Garuda basically don't function. After the upgrade, we see that the Mystic Titan can fly into the atmosphere, and they do their flying maneuver and strike down onto Koragg. And of course, he's like, "Oh, if you've improved," and given that it's same usual excuse, and he simply retreats. So after Koragg retreats and the Rangers finally return to Rock Emporium, we see that Necroli actually wasn't killed. She simply recombines her pieces and forms back to herself. Now, this thing made absolutely no sense. This happens even in the Maji Ranger episodes. If Necroli wasn't actually killed, how does the spell get broken? Normally in PR logic, Super Sentai logic, the monster has to be physically killed permanently so that the spell doesn't come back. So the Rangers finally return to the Rock Emporium and everything returns to normal, and everyone's like, oh, haha, this, that, and trying to explain, oh, the vampire stuff was just a joke on the guy, and I was faking you, and Lily basically trying to go along, yeah, this is fake, I didn't believe you, and then runs off. Obviously, she does believe, and then she goes and heads out. While Rangers are having a laugh, we think the episode's over, but we follow Lily into this dark alley, and then we see Necrolai's shadow, and we're like, oh, great. But at the last minute, Necrolai approaches Lily, and then all of a sudden they break out into this random fight. It made no sense whatsoever. But the moment I saw Lily fighting, I was like, oh, okay, Lily's something different than what she's appeared to be. So after this fight breaks out and Necrolai stops her, we get this final big reveal that Necrolai is her mother. So overall, I have to give the episode 4 out of 5 stars. This was really an excellent episode. I mean, it showcased the actor for Chip and Vita. They had great personalities, great chemistry between the two. The episode was using the Maji Ranger plot points, which obviously it gives it a plus, and it does give it an unoriginality. But the point is that since the characters were so well done, what do you guys personally think? Do you think this episode was really good? Do you like Chip's character the way he is, acting like a big kid, an idiot, and also you like how Vita his personality toward him and how they answered so many questions, like some backstory for the cast. Of course, leave your comments below. Leave your suggestions below for future episodes. For next week's episode, I'll be reviewing Dome Dolls from Power Rangers RPM. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys right back here next week.